common sense and ask them whether our jury should have been told about this information, about this group that named the victim, that wanted to kill him, that knew what the murder weapon was before anybody else did. If you asked any objective people whether our jury should have been told that, of course they would say yes. And if you took that survey and anybody said otherwise, there is no reason that would be given that would not amount to a cynicism about the trial process itself. The next thing I want to talk about is this undercover operation, which evidence made our trial unfair. Most people are familiar with it, but I want to summarize it briefly for anyone who might not know. The tactic of this undercover operation, in essence, is to pose as organized criminals, to approach the suspect, to tell him they have objective, secret information from the police, to prove it to him by giving him secret information, and then confirming it later by police press releases that confirm that the information was true. To tell the suspect that a scientist has already found him guilty of the crime. To tell him organized crime is convinced that when he's arrested, he's going to tell on the organization, and that accordingly the outstanding charge, the implication is, makes him a threat to the organization. The suspect is told, you've already been found guilty by the police, you're going to be convicted. We think this makes you a threat to us. If you say guilty words, all that goes away. Now, Canadian police officers were to go undercover as curiosity seekers or novelists, and were to pay people money for true stories of true crime, and were to get incriminating statements that way. I think most people would agree that that evidence would not have a place in a civilized courtroom. In this case, the pressure and the coercions and the inducements are far more extreme. In this case, they're literally life and death. But with the presentation of this evidence, the waters are muddied. The most fair way to show this evidence to the jury would be to play these tapes of these undercover scenarios and not tell them that it's an undercover operation. Just play the tapes. It would be shocking. It would be bizarre. So much so that it would almost seem cruel to the sensibilities of the audience and to the jurors not to tell them that it's okay, it's all fake. It would be strange, and afterwards, if the jury were informed that one of the parties was telling a tall tale because of this startling situation, it wouldn't be any stranger than anything else. Well, I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. I simply don't have time to say what I wanted to say today.
If you have other things you want to say, you say it.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. I do have a number of things I wanted to say. I just apparently, from Your Honor's request, that I bring it to a conclusion.
If you have some other points you want to make, you go ahead and make them. I don't want to restrict your right of allocution. I just simply think that you've gone on here for quite a while. So make your other points you need to make, Mr. Burns. You go ahead, Jim.
Okay, Your Honor. Well, with your permission, then I will continue as I need to. As I was saying, the way this evidence is presented in court, the officers testify extensively about thinking. This changes the illusion so that now it doesn't seem real. And any chance the jurors may have had to empathize with what this situation was like is gone. The resulting feeling is that maybe he did think he was going to be killed on May the 6th, but what bearing does that have on his decisions a week or a month later? And the problem doesn't just stop there. Because the way this evidence is presented includes expert analysis of the defendant's behavior, what the defendant says, his body language. One of the police officers in this case testified he believed that we were guilty because of our body language and because of when we did or did not say that we did or didn't do it. And the defense had their own experts. We wanted to present our interpretation to the jury. Because when a police officer says something like, I think he's guilty because of the way he acts in this scene, that's an argument. The defense is entitled to answer that argument. Closing argument does not give time to answer that. These officers gave this kind of testimony for weeks and weeks. A closing argument doesn't give time to respond. The only time you would have to respond would be if you were presenting your own witnesses. We had a PhD psychologist, an expert in false confessions. We were not allowed to have him testify. There was also an American former DEA agent, an expert in undercover police operations, who had studied the evidence and had come to the conclusion that the confessions were false and given a detailed report of why he came to this conclusion. This is the kind of evidence with which we were going to answer the state's case. We were not allowed to present it. The result of this is that we've been tried, we've been convicted for something we didn't do. We're still standing here waiting for our day in court, waiting for a chance to put on our defense. The only other chance we would have had was my testimony, and of course I wasn't allowed to give that either. And I have to say, in my testimony I made a reference to the Henry Hill story. Probably nobody knows what the Henry Hill story is, but everybody might have heard of the movie Goodfellas, which is based on the Henry Hill story. And I just bring that up because it's a true story, and it's plenty clear that in any kind of organized crime situation, the policy is dead men tell no tales, and no, you are not given a warning first. Even if we were to pretend that we don't know that organized crime figures are inherently intimidating, even if we were to pretend that that element is just not present at all, what is the overt tactic in this case? Take a teenager who's been cut off from society for 9 months, can't work, can't get a job, hears people muttering things about him in public, who is told by the only adults he can speak to that the police will frame you, who says at the outset he has no faith in the justice system, no faith in police officers. I mean, right or wrong, immaturely or otherwise, this is how he thinks. No faith in the news media. And then to tell him, even police agencies have agents of organized crime. Your lawyer will not be able to help you unless he's connected with organized crime. Even the mayor's breakfast is as likely to have members of organized crime at it. And then to tell him that science has already found him guilty of the crime. The tactic, in essence, from the perspective of this one target is to bring the administration of justice into disrepute. The tactic, in essence, is to take a teenager whose faith in the possibility of justice is hanging by a thread, and then to cut that thread. And the way that they propose to determine whether a person is guilty based on this evidence is to have police officers interpret the tapes. And let me be clear, there was no holdback evidence in this case. And I know some of the jurors have said, Bosma's standing up, that's holdback evidence. Some of the jurors have publicly said, show me an article that says that. The article is July 19, 1994, the Vancouver province describes Bosma struggling, fleeing, fighting. Literally, no, that's not standing up. If you were to take a survey of common people and ask them, would they think that that means a person is standing up or lying down? 9 or 10 of those people would tell you that they think the person is standing up. That's not holdback evidence. The only way that's been suggested to determine whether these statements were real or false is to use expert interpretation. We were unable to tell this jury what other suspects knew what the murder weapon was before anybody else did. We were prosecuted with a tactic that would not be legal in this country, which relies on the greatest possible life and death inducements. We were not able to present evidence of our interpretations of this evidence to answer the state's case. I was not allowed to give critical testimony that I needed to give to explain this evidence by a lawyer who would not interview me about the critical time period of the case. I was impeached with tape recordings from 9 years before, using misleading fragments, making what are effectively jokes about innocence sound like statements about guilt. I think any objective professional, any objective layperson would agree that we were defending ourselves in this trial with both arms tied behind our backs.